The entire world mutated, plunging the whole planet into a deadly crisis. As long as one makes the slightest sound, they will become the prey of the monsters. My elder sister, already burdened with 2 children, still chose to get pregnant and give birth at this critical time. I strongly opposed her decision to keep the baby, yet she insisted on giving birth. As soon as the child was born, they dumped it on me to take care of. Because the baby kept crying, it was discovered and eaten by the monsters. My sister, her husband, and my parents all blamed me for failing to take good care of the child. In a fit of anger, my brother-in-law stabbed me to death with a knife. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself reborn a month before the mutation crisis struck. 01, Aurora, Noah, and Natalie are on summer vacation. Your sister has to go to work, and since you're free every day, could you please help take care of the children? Hearing this familiar voice, it took me a while to realize that I had been reborn. I was reborn a month before the arrival of the deadly crisis. It was my heartless mother, who always took my sister's side, speaking to me, while I was lost in thought. My mother kept chattering on. Your sister has it tough. As the younger sister, you should be more understanding of her. It's just for the summer vacation. Things will be fine once school starts again. I snapped back to reality and forced a smile, saying, Mom, I have work to do. Aren't you also not working? It would be enough if you took care of them. I had already experienced firsthand in my previous life how annoying those 2 children were. They were extremely rowdy, and just taking care of them for half a month made me lose several pounds of weight. My sister and her husband not only didn't appreciate my efforts, but also thought that it was all my mother's doing, and I was just lending a hand. They mocked me for being overly sensitive. Upon hearing this, my mother became displeased. What kind of lousy job is yours? Just writing novels? It's not a proper job. What's wrong with asking you to help take care of the children? They are your own nephews and nieces, not strangers. Mom, doesn't my sister have her in-laws? No matter what, it shouldn't be our turn to take care of the kids, right? You know very well that your sister's in-laws have to go to work. Where do they have the time? Hearing her words, I sneered. So they just picked on the soft target, which was me. In my previous life, feeling sorry for my sister's hardships, I agreed without much thought. As a result, the quality of my manuscript that month didn't meet the standard, and my manuscript fee decreased significantly. After the end of the world arrived, my sister's family, along with my parents, only thought about saving their own lives. If I hadn't been of some use, they would have probably kicked me out long ago. I was the one who found the food, and I also found the safe cellar. In a situation where making the slightest sound could mean death in the next second, it was extremely difficult and scarce to obtain food. The mortality rate across the entire world reached 60%. The remaining people were barely surviving, yet my sister chose to get pregnant in that critical moment and insisted on giving birth to the child. My parents and brother-in-law also thought it was a life and decided to keep it. I was the only one who strongly refused and disagreed, because this was very likely to put our whole family in danger. Unexpectedly, my mother slapped me and called me cold-blooded. 02. After the child was born, they unhesitatingly left it to me. My sister couldn't breastfeed, so the child could only drink milk powder, but due to limited conditions, the baby cried hungrily every day. Fortunately, the sound insulation in the cellar was good, and they weren't discovered. But people sometimes do reckless things. My sister suddenly had the idea that she wanted the whole family to go outside for some fresh air, as the child hadn't seen the sun during the day yet. Unexpectedly, just because of this idea, when the child was crying, it attracted the monsters, and they carried the child away in one bite. We dodged and hid, barely managing to escape the pursuit of the monsters. When we returned to the cellar, the whole family blamed me for not taking good care of the child. My brother-in-law grabbed a fruit knife and stabbed me to death on the spot. My parents were also scolding me beside, saying that I had a short life and deserved it. After thinking for a moment, I suddenly smiled and said, Mom, how about this? I'll go out to find a job, and you can help take care of the children. If I find a job, I'll give you more than half of my salary as the payment for taking care of the kids. When my mother heard about more than half of the salary, her eyes lit up. And I knew she was tempted. Are you serious? You know, as a master's graduate from a prestigious university, my salary wouldn't be less than 20,000 yuan if I found a job. More than half of that would be over 10,000 yuan. Of course, she was delighted. Okay, then it's a deal. Aurora, you're really a good daughter to me. My mother smiled and patted my shoulder. Then I'll go pick up the children now. Okay. While she was picking up the children, I completely stopped what I was doing. Since the end of the world was approaching, there was no point in writing novels anymore. It was urgent to stock up on supplies. What they didn't know was that over the years, I had saved a lot of money from writing novels and had already achieved financial freedom. I drove to the cellar where I lived during the end of the world in my previous life. this cellar was in a very remote location, and ordinary people simply couldn't find it. It had long been abandoned by the original owner. I also found it by chance in my previous life. In the cellar, I fished out a copper ring from the corner. I smiled with satisfaction. This was a space ring with an area of tens of thousands of square meters. I discovered it the day before I died, and before I could tell them about it, I was killed. I put away the ring and left the cellar. 03. I started going on a shopping spree. First, I found the best decoration team and planned to decorate that cold and cheerless cellar. I used the best materials. And I didn't skimp on the bed, sofa, or any piece of furniture. Then I went to buy daily necessities, feminine products, all kinds of clothes for different seasons, underwear, bed sheets and pillowcases, toothbrushes, cups, towels, buckets, powerful flashlights, a large number of candles for lighting, and all kinds of medicines were also essential. I rented a large warehouse and had the goods delivered there directly. Then I put them into the space ring. Since my parents knew that I was looking for a job these days, they didn't bother me. However, my sister kept sending messages, wanting me to come back and take care of the children for her. I gave some perfunctory replies, and continued to stock up on supplies. After stocking up on all kinds of things, the most important thing next was food. Well, money wasn't a problem, I had plenty of it. The space in the ring could keep things fresh, so I didn't have to worry about the food going bad. Now money could buy anything, but when the end of the world came, tens of thousands of yuan might not even be able to buy a piece of bread. I didn't go home for several days in a row. Only then did my mother call to ask. And she started scolding as soon as she opened her mouth. Aurora, are you dead outside? You haven't come back for several days. Could it be that you're really like what your sister said, lying to me and hiding away to avoid taking care of the children? I sneered secretly and forced a smile. How could that be, Mom? I'll go home tonight. I checked the decoration progress of the cellar, and in the evening, I drove home. As soon as I entered the door, I heard the sounds of laughter and play in the living room. My sister and brother-in-law were sitting on the sofa chatting. When she saw me come back, she sized me up and said in a sarcastic tone, "TSK, the busy person finally knows to come back. I didn't see you being so eager to find a job before. Aurora, if you really don't want to help take care of Noah and Natalie, just say so directly. There's no need to beat around the bush like this, otherwise, people might think I'm bullying you." Aurora, why do you always make your sister angry? It's just about taking care of the children. Who are you making that sour face for? My father walked out of the kitchen. When he heard my sister's words, he looked at me with a face full of anger. Since I was a child, my parents had always favored my sister. I was already used to it. Just like now, I hadn't said a single word since I entered the door, and they immediately blamed me without distinguishing right from wrong. Aurora, it's not that I'm criticizing you, you're just being spoiled by your parents. If you were in my family and just loafed around like this every day, you would have been kicked out long ago. My brother-in-law beside also started to chime in. Looking at his disgusting face, my body trembled slightly. Just thinking about the pain of the knife stabbing into my abdomen made me shudder. Then I'm quite lucky that I wasn't born into your family. Brother-in-law, Aurora, upon hearing this, my sister was the first to object. How can you talk to your brother-in-law like this? Do you have any manners at all? My father squinted his eyes. Aurora, apologize to your brother-in-law immediately. It's not my fault. Why should I apologize? Just because I didn't help them take care of the children. Dad, don't be so ridiculous. Did I give birth to Noah and Natalie? Their parents don't even take care of them. Why should I? I was so angry that I laughed, my sister said. Your brother-in-law and I have to go to work. You're free anyway. Who said I'm free? I've already found a job. Next month, I can transfer half of my salary to my parents. After all, it's only right that I do this since my parents raised me. What about you? You just keep asking for things from your natal family and have never helped our parents even once. After hearing my words, my father's expression improved a bit. He waved his hand and stopped blaming me. Well, at least you have a conscience. Then let your mother take care of Noah and Natalie for the next 2 months, and you just focus on your work. My sister widened her eyes. Dad, don't say anything more. That's the decision. 04. In the remaining days, I stocked up on supplies with peace of mind, until I almost used up all my savings. The end of the world was about to arrive. Unlike natural disasters and zombie apocalypses, the silent apocalypse was truly despairing. The mortality rate was extremely high, the monsters had sensitive hearing, and any slight sound might attract them. 3 days before the end of the world arrived, everything in the whole world was still operating normally. Everyone was unaware that the crisis was about to come. My mother was happily taking care of my 2 nephews, and her WeChat moments were filled with posts every day, in a 5-star hotel. I was enjoying the lively world in the last few days. When I was about to go out and see if there was anything else I could buy, in the lobby, I suddenly ran into someone I knew. It was my brother-in-law, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was a fat middle-aged woman dressed in all brand-name clothes, who was at least in her 40s. When he saw me, he was also surprised, then his eyes turned fierce, full of threats. I smiled. He had obviously latched onto a rich woman, however. I didn't plan to meddle in his business. After they left, I secretly took a photo of his profile and back. It would be nice to use it to provoke my sister at a crucial moment. I went to stock up on some more supplies and came back. Just as I stepped into the hotel lobby, a heart-wrenching scream suddenly came from outside. Without any warning, when I heard the sound, as if I thought of something, my face instantly turned pale, and I mechanically turned my head to look behind me. I saw that on the bustling street in the distance, countless monsters descended from the sky. The monsters were more than 5 meters tall, had 3 heads, and their claws were as sharp as hook knives. They charged into the screaming crowd and rampaged. In just tens of seconds, the ground was covered in blood, and there were human tissues all over the place. I never expected that the end of the world would come earlier. Reacting instinctively from my previous life, my mind worked quickly. I rushed to the underground parking lot at full speed. The hotel was about 10-some kilometers away from the direction of the cellar. The first invasion of the monsters was only in this area and hadn't spread across the whole place yet. If I wanted to escape, I could still do it, but these things had a very high reproductive capacity. Cats gave birth to a litter every 2 months, while they only needed 1 month. As a result, the living space for humans was getting smaller and smaller. I got into the car, stepped on the gas pedal, and rushed out of the hotel parking lot without hesitation. I drove frantically towards my destination. On the way, I could still see many monsters hurting people. My palms were so scared that they were sweating. I prayed that I wouldn't encounter them, but what I feared the most happened. A monster rushed in front of my car and raised its claw to slap at my car. I gritted my teeth and made up my mind, then crashed into it. The car shook and jolted. The monster was knocked flying, and I ignored everything and continued stepping on the gas pedal. Soon, the car was far away from the downtown area, but I didn't dare to relax my vigilance completely and carefully observed the road conditions. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. 05. I successfully arrived at the cellar. Looking at the newly renovated place in front of me, I closed the door of the cellar and locked it from the inside. Then I let out a deep breath. It was thrilling and exciting. I lay on the sofa, turned on my phone, plugged in my earphones, and watched the news of the day. The news was filled with reports of monsters hurting people. The downtown area was covered in blood, and it was a tragic scene. Those people still didn't seem to realize that sound was the most crucial factor. They were still screaming nonstop, accompanied by the cries of children and women. I felt a bit of pity in my heart. I opened the local forum and posted a message. The monsters are extremely sensitive to sound, and they rely on this to identify directions. When something happens, you must stay calm. Remember, never make any sound at all. This was all I could do to help. There was nothing else I could do. As for whether they believed it or not, it was up to them. Having experienced my previous life, I didn't dare to trust anyone now. The food stocked in the space was completely enough for me to eat for several years. I wasn't worried at all now. As soon as my post was published on the forum, it was quickly pushed to the top of the local city's hot search by netizens who were shivering at home. Most people didn't believe such an outrageous thing and thought that the authorities would soon step in to solve and suppress it. They just needed to stay at home and wait for the result. Who is this person? What nonsense is she talking about here? Listening to sound to identify directions, is she treating this like a movie? There are always these self-righteous people on the internet trying to gain popularity. Just take a look. If anyone believes this, I'll laugh at them for the rest of my life. The internet isn't a place beyond the law, sister. Making up rumors randomly can get you into trouble. Could it be that I'm the only one who thinks what she said makes sense? I've carefully observed those monsters. They don't have eyes, and it really seems like they identify positions by listening to sounds. TSK, there really are people who believe this. Haha. As soon as the phenomenon of monsters attacking and even eating people appeared, the surrounding cities also started to suffer. In just 1 hour, the preliminary statistics showed that the number of deaths was as high as tens of thousands. The official issued an emergency notice. Everyone should stay at home in quarantine, and don't go out in the near future. 06. I took out a lollipop from the space and put it in my mouth. I was thinking about why the monsters had come earlier in this life. Was it because of the butterfly effect of being reborn? Some things had changed from their original tracks. Until the evening, my parents didn't contact me. They probably thought I had already died in the mouth of the monsters, right? I was really looking forward to seeing if this family would still be as affectionate as they were in the previous life without me looking for supplies. For dinner, I just had a simple meal. I brushed the news again. The number of deaths in this city had already reached 100,000, and it was still increasing. It wasn't until the next morning that I received a WeChat message from my mother, Aurora. "Where the hell have you gone? With such a big thing happening, you didn't even contact me and your father. You're such an ungrateful wretch. We raised you for nothing. Come back home immediately and take care of Noah and Natalie." I sneered. Judging from the current situation, it was estimated that the food at home was about to run out, and they wanted me to go and find supplies for them. I was so stupid in my previous life, believing in that ridiculous so-called family affection every time I risked my life to go out, but in the end, I didn't get any gratitude and was even stabbed to death by that scumbag of a brother-in-law. I deliberately waited for a while before replying. "Don't my sister and brother-in-law have nothing to do now? Let them take care of the kids, you little bitch. How dare you talk to your mother like that? You come back right now as I tell you, believe it or not, I'll break your legs." I couldn't stop laughing. "Sure, come and do it now." I wondered if she could still say such words in a few days. You've really grown bold, haven't you?" My mother was furious, but didn't know what else to do with me. Soon, I received a WeChat message from my sister, 07, "Aurora, how could you treat Mom like this? She wants you to come back because she cares about you and is afraid that you'll suffer outside. Isn't it better for our family to be together? You're really being unreasonable. Come back quickly and apologize to Mom and Dad properly. I'll plead for you." I took a glance at the message and directly turned off my phone, not even bothering to reply. On their side, after waiting for a long time without getting a reply from me, they gritted their teeth in anger. "This little bitch is doing it on purpose. Did she already know that this day would come and deliberately hide away?" My brother-in-law made his own speculation. "She might be enjoying herself somewhere right now." My mother clenched her teeth so hard that they creaked. "Even if she knew, she didn't tell us. That damned girl only cares about enjoying herself. We are her closest relatives." However, I couldn't hear their words. I took out the fitness equipment from the space ring. In such a dangerous situation full of crises, physical exercise was of great importance. It's better to be safe than sorry. Having a good physical fitness would give me a better chance of survival when I needed to escape. A few days passed in a flash. During these days, every day, through the pinhole camera at the door of the cellar, I witnessed tragic scenes. There were residents living nearby, but after a few days, they were almost completely devoured by the monsters. People gradually began to believe what I had said on the forum before. Only by maintaining absolute silence could they survive. The network and electricity supply hadn't been interrupted by the appearance of the monsters yet. The server of the local forum was almost paralyzed, and everyone was in a panic, fearing that they would be the next to die. I knew that all of this was just the beginning. This apocalypse would last for more than a year, and perhaps even longer. After all, I was killed before I could live to see the end of it. Boom. While I was thinking, the sound of things collapsing came from the monitor, accompanied by heart-rending screams and the roars of the monsters. When I saw this, my heart suddenly jolted, and the tragic scenes of mountains of corpses and seas of blood from my previous life flashed through my mind. 08. In the monitor, several men were gasping for breath and running for their lives. Those who ran a little slower were quickly caught by the monsters and became their prey. It was a tragic scene. At the same time, at my parents' place, after several days of consumption, the food had been completely eaten up. Since I wasn't at home, they had no one to order around. Naturally, they had to send someone out to find food. Given my parents' selfish nature, this task fell on my sister. My brother-in-law was a man in his prime, and they didn't dare to order him around. "No, I'm not going. Why should you all stay at home and enjoy yourselves while I have to face the monsters?" my sister strongly protested, her whole body trembling. "Bella, you're the only one who can go now. Your father and I are already old. You surely don't want to see us get into trouble, do you?" My mother tried to persuade her earnestly. "Noah and Natalie are still hungry. As a mother, you can't just watch your children suffer, can you? Then why don't you ask Mark to go?" my sister raged. "I'm your biological daughter. How could you treat me like this?" My mother's face turned ugly, and she said resentfully, "It's all that damned Aurora's fault. She abandoned us and went to enjoy herself. This little bitch. I should have drowned her in the urine bucket when she was born." "Bella, go quickly, we'll be waiting for you to come back." Mark beside didn't show the slightest concern for his wife. He kept urging her. Since her husband had spoken, even though my sister was extremely reluctant, she had to muster up the courage to go out. A big commotion and argument might get everyone killed. At the moment, the street was eerily quiet, with corpses and pieces of flesh everywhere. The weather had already entered summer, under the scorching sun. The strong stench mixed with the smell of blood filled Bella's nostrils. Looking at the tragic scene in front of her, she was filled with horror and tightly covered her mouth to prevent herself from vomiting. She became even more resentful towards me in her heart. She thought that if it weren't for my selfishness and going to enjoy myself, she wouldn't have had to come out to find food today. The only supermarket downstairs had basically been ransacked. There were only some rice, flour, and unpalatable canned goods left. She took everything that was edible. Just as she was about to turn back, a group of people blocked her way. 09. There were hardly any good people showing up at this time. Bella immediately protected the food in her hands. Be sensible and hand over the things, and we won't make things difficult for you. A mobile phone was shown to Bella, with a line of words written on it. The leader winked at the person beside him. Afraid that Bella would scream and attract the monsters, that person quickly covered her mouth. With a threatening look in his eyes, Bella was afraid of death. As soon as she was threatened, she immediately gave in. When she came back empty-handed, my parents and Mark were all stunned. You were out for so long. Where's the food? You didn't bring anything back. Bella didn't dare to say that she had been robbed. She lowered her head and said in a low voice, "We haven't been downstairs for several days, and the things in the supermarket downstairs have been completely looted. Then couldn't you go to a farther place to look for food?" Mark said with a displeased look on his face. "This is your home. Don't you know where else there are supermarkets?" Bella widened her eyes and looked at the faces full of blame in front of her. She had never suffered such grievances before. She suddenly lost her temper. "Then why didn't you go with me? You just know how to scold me. Aren't the children yours? Letting a woman go out to find food while you stay at home and enjoy yourself. You're such a coward." Mark hated it the most when others called him a coward. His face immediately turned extremely ugly. "Am I a coward, who works so hard outside every day to earn money for you to spend? What's wrong with asking you to go find some food?" Bella sneered through gritted teeth. "I'm also working, aren't I? What right do you have to scold me? If I had known you were such a coward, I would rather have married a piece of roasted pork than you. You're a complete loser." Just as Mark was so angry that he was about to slap her, suddenly, a loud bang came from downstairs, accompanied by desperate and helpless screams. The whole apartment building shook. This commotion startled all of them. Seeing the tragic scene downstairs, my mother closed the curtains and said with a pale face, "It's the monsters. The monsters are here." The family sat together on the sofa, thinking of me. They gritted their teeth in hatred. Bella's face was filled with venom. "It's all that bitch Aurora's fault. When this is all over, I'll make her pay." 10. At this moment, I was lying on the sofa, happily eating ice cream. As I was eating, I suddenly remembered something. Before, to prevent those people from secretly entering my room, I installed a pinhole camera in the room. At that time, my expensive brand-name cosmetics always disappeared for no reason. Bella, my parents, and they all flatly denied taking them. After installing the camera, I found out that it was my sister who took them. When I confronted them, they thought I was making a big deal out of nothing, being too excessive, and not respecting my sister, and they scolded me severely. I kept giving in everywhere, but in the end, I got such an ending. I turned on the monitor. My room was already in a complete mess, with garbage all over the floor and the two naughty children. Perhaps because they were hungry, the two of them didn't have the same lively spirit as before. I sneered. When I died in my previous life, these two little brats didn't hold back at all. They even joined in and said that I deserved to die. They even stepped on my corpse several times. I took a few deep breaths and closed the video. Just when I thought I would spend the days in the cellar in peace, that night, a rustling sound suddenly came from the exit. It was as if someone was trying to pry open the door of the cellar, but the sound was very faint. If I didn't listen carefully, I wouldn't be able to hear it. I suddenly jumped up from the bed and quickly turned on the outside monitor. "Are you really sure it's here? You won't be mistaken, will you?" "How could I be mistaken? I saw that woman decorating it with my own eyes. She probably already sensed the coming of the monsters and made all the preparations in advance. Not only is it soundproof in here, but the place is also big. She must have stocked up a lot of food. As long as we pry open this door, then," the two men spoke in very low voices, but through the monitor's sound pickup, I could hear them clearly. The corners of my mouth slowly curled up into a sneer. I had reinforced the door of the cellar precisely to prevent such people. It could be said that not even a landmine could blow it open. Even so, I still remained highly vigilant and took out my self-defense weapon. I stared fixedly at the door of the cellar. However, the sound soon stopped. The two men were out of breath from exhaustion but didn't want to return empty-handed. They kept wandering around, trying to find a way. They didn't dare to use brute force because once there was any sound, It would attract the monsters. Compared with the natural disaster apocalypses and zombie apocalypses in movies, the silent apocalypse greatly restricted a group of ruthless looters. If you try to kill me, then we might as well all die together. These two men were relying on the soundproofing of the cellar, otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to come and cause trouble so blatantly. It was not until the late night that the two men left reluctantly. 11 in the morning, I cooked a delicious breakfast. I continued to turn on the monitors on both sides. There was no sign of human activity at all around me. However, at my parents' place, they started arguing again because of the food problem, and it happened to be in my room. Bella absolutely refused to go out again. Stop having ideas about me. Either we all go out together, or we all die together. You heartless little bitch. Do you want us all to be wiped out? My father suddenly flew into a rage. The hunger in his stomach made him extremely irritable. Am I heartless? Then is it right for you to let me go to my death? Aurora was right. You're just selfish and only think about yourselves when something happens. Bella, as expected, was spoiled by my parents. She didn't back down at all. My father raised his hand, wanting to hit her, but Mark stopped him directly. Stop arguing at this time, if you want to die. Don't drag me down with you. I watched their argument with great interest. Unexpectedly, the next moment, I received a message from my mother. Aurora, how are you out there? When will you come home? Your father and I already know that we were wrong. We shouldn't have always favored your sister before. Come back, and we will make it up to you in the future. I couldn't help but laugh out loud, so they also knew that they had been biased. I typed a reply unhurriedly. Mom, don't say that. I also want to go back. But there are so many monsters outside. I'm powerless. After bickering for a while, my mother completely lost her patience. Aurora, did you already know about this and deliberately not tell us? How could you be so heartless? We are your closest relatives. How could you bear to watch us starve to death? You used to dote on my sister the most. Now it's her turn to fulfill her filial duties. After sending the message, I turned off my phone. I casually took a photo of myself eating beef noodles and posted it in my WeChat moments, which was only visible to my parents and my sister. The family, who hadn't had a full meal for several days, turned red-eyed when they saw this post. This damned bitch, she's really hiding away and enjoying herself. Hatred and greed flashed in my sister's eyes. Is it true that as long as we find out where she is, all this food will be ours? Mark said with a gloomy face. We must find out the address of this little bitch. Damn it. When I find this bitch, I'll definitely kill her. He squinted his eyes and licked his lips. In such a situation, it wasn't against the law to kill someone in the chaos. I shrugged my shoulders, not worried at all, not to mention whether he knew where I was or not. Even if he did, so what? The money I spent on reinforcing the cellar wasn't wasted. At the same time, I received a flurry of messages from my sister, my parents. I sent them many more pictures of delicious food with a grin, which made them curse me furiously. 12. Time passed peacefully like this for a month. Within a radius of hundreds of miles, the number of living people was less than 30%. The local forum had completely stopped operating. To my surprise, my parents were still alive, and my sister found out that she was pregnant a month earlier than in my previous life. This time, it was my parents who opposed her giving birth to the child, but the couple insisted on keeping it. In my previous life, I was the bad guy who tried to persuade her to have an abortion. My parents didn't need to say anything and instead accused me of being cold-blooded. Now without me, let's see how they deal with this unexpected child. Do you know what the consequence of keeping this child will be? We might all die. Dad, Mom, this is a living life. He has the right to be born. With Mark and me, you don't need to worry about raising him. My sister smiled and asked the two children, Noah, Natalie, do you like the little brother that Mom is going to have for you? Yes, Natalie likes the little brother the most. My mother's heart ached with anger. In just 1 month, due to the scarcity of food, all of them had lost a lot of weight. They didn't even have enough food for themselves, so how could they raise another child? Mark said, Mom and Dad, since Bella is pregnant, she's no longer suitable to go out and find food. From now on, this task will be yours. My parents were completely taken aback. Although I couldn't hear clearly what they were saying in the monitor, I could more or less guess it. After watching for a while, I stopped looking. Instead, I continued to turn on the monitor at the entrance of the cellar to check the situation. The whole world was desolate, as if it had returned to the primitive era, but I didn't find my life boring at all. On the contrary, I really enjoyed living alone. I basically didn't miss my daily exercise, and my skin became visibly firmer. But just a few days after the peaceful days, something unexpected happened. My sister sent me a message saying that my father went out to find food yesterday and hadn't come back yet. I didn't feel anything. If he didn't come back, it was highly likely that something bad had happened to him. In my previous life, I valued family affection so much, but in this life, I actually hoped that they would all die. Humans are really strange creatures. I only replied with an "Oh, 13, my sister said. Aurora, are you still human? That's your own father. How can you not react at all? I smiled and said, he's also your father, but you let him go out to find food. After all he's done for you since you were a child, don't you feel guilty? It's just moral kidnapping, everyone can do it, but I'm pregnant, I can't go out to find food, and Mark needs to take care of me. If he doesn't go, then who will? I didn't bother to pay attention to her. Aurora. You've been reborn too, right? Half an hour later, she sent another message, this time a voice message, full of excitement. I frowned. Could it be that she had also been reborn? This wasn't good news. If that was the case, it meant that they had all perished in the previous life, and it was very likely that my parents had also been reborn. Oh, no, my father was dead now, so he couldn't have been reborn, you ungrateful girl. Even though you've been reborn, you're still so selfish and only think about yourself. Your father and I really raised you for nothing. Then, my mother also sent a message. If you still have a conscience, come and pick us up obediently. Don't just enjoy yourself alone. Between the lines, she didn't mention at all the fact that in the previous life, they had forced me to go out to find food and had condoned that scoundrel Mark to kill me. Conscience, Ms. Jiang, you and the others ate up my conscience in the previous life. This time, I'm going to watch you die, step by step, with my own eyes. I sent 2 voice messages with a smile. Hearing my words, my mother was furious and sent several vicious cursing voice messages. You bitch, do you think we don't know where you are? Just you wait. This was Mark's voice. Soon I heard the sound of them plotting in the monitor. I wasn't worried at all and calmly waited for their arrival. I had anticipated all the bad outcomes before, even if they called for help on the spot. In short, even if they attracted the monsters or tried to blow up the cellar with landmines, this cellar was an absolute defense. My guess was right. Besides my mother, my sister, and those 2 naughty children, Mark also gathered 7 or 8 other people. They lingered at the entrance of the cellar. I found 2 of them somewhat familiar, but I couldn't remember where I had seen them after thinking for a long time. There's a lot of food in this cellar. As long as we open it, we won't have to go hungry anymore, Mark said with a dark face, typing and sending the message to the group chat. And the cellar is soundproof, then you can do whatever you want inside. When the others heard this, they immediately became motivated. My sister didn't forget to send me a message. We're already here. If you don't open the door, when we break in, you'll suffer. If I were you, I'd kneel down and beg for mercy and let everyone in obediently now. I smiled and replied to her, go ahead then, let's see if they can get in. My sister didn't expect that I was still so arrogant even when I was on the verge of death. She was extremely angry, but thinking about my upcoming fate, she felt a bit relieved. I planned to give her a real shock, but not now. The men prepared their tools and started to take action. They pried at the edge of the cellar door. In a situation where they couldn't make any sound, they had to be extremely careful. 7 strong men pried for half an hour, but the cellar door didn't budge at all. The surrounding area was all cement ground, and there was no way to dig. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be difficult to break through the cement. But the problem was that the monsters were sensitive to sound. If they made a single mistake, all of them would die. What they didn't know is that even if the surrounding area was all muddy ground, they still couldn't dig through it smoothly, because I had comprehensively reinforced the cellar. The inside was made of the strongest steel plates, which was equivalent to a large iron box. Even if they dug until their hands were broken, it wouldn't have any effect on the cellar. Before I knew it, half a day had passed. I took out a camping stove and hot pot base from the ring, and leisurely started to cook hot pot. Then I took out all kinds of ingredients for the hot pot. The aroma soon wafted out mercilessly through the cracks of the cellar door. The people outside, who were still hungry, were so that their eyes glowed green. Damn it, I must open this place today. I want to eat. I can't stand being hungry for so many days anymore. Now they were even more convinced that what Mark said was true. There were a lot of food resources here. My mother and sister looked at each other, as if they saw hope. Greed and desire were written all over their faces. My sister clenched her fists and said, you guys work harder. As long as we open this door, there will be an endless supply of food. Until the evening, the door still didn't move at all. There wasn't even a single mark left on it. 15. The men who had been hungry for a whole day gritted their teeth and sent a message to Mark. Is this what you call easy to dig? Are you playing us for fools? Mark was also a bit incredulous. It wasn't like this in the previous life. Thinking about it, he sent me a message. Aurora, you really have some nerve. If you have the guts, don't come out for the rest of your life. I'll stay here and keep watch every day. I don't believe you won't come out. Mark knew exactly how big the cellar was. He didn't believe that it could store that much food. This bitch must have hidden the food somewhere else. Sure, then you can keep watch. You can just help me guard the door, I replied with a smile. I also sent my sister the video I took of Mark having an affair with the old woman in the hotel. My sister received the message and was confused at first, but when she saw the video, her eyes widened, and a fierce anger burned in her eyes. She completely lost her mind. She was a person who couldn't tolerate the slightest infidelity. How could she bear her husband's affair? Mark, you're such a bastard, you dare to betray me. She immediately sent the video to my brother-in-law and asked, who is this bitch? When Mark saw the video, his face instantly turned as black as coal. Stop making a scene at this time. Okay, she's just a client of mine. We were just discussing business. Client? What kind of client would you go to a hotel with, you damn scumbag? You're really not a good person. My sister couldn't help but curse. You're always looking at other women while you already have a wife. I'll scratch you to death. Mark slapped her across the face. That's enough. Do you want to get us all killed? Just as he finished speaking, a familiar sound suddenly came, getting closer and closer. Everyone's body trembled. They looked tremblingly in the direction of the sound. They saw several huge monsters running towards them at a high speed. Before they could even start running for their lives, in the blink of an eye, the monsters carried away several people, and the screams were endless. Noah and Natalie didn't escape either. The couple didn't care about their old mother and children at all. They just ran for their own lives. Help. 16. My mother had never seen such a scene before. She closed her eyes and fainted, but no one paid attention to her. The monsters came in groups. In less than 10 minutes, the 7 people Mark brought, along with his 2 children, all died in the mouths of the monsters. Blood and pieces of flesh were all over the ground. Mark died a very tragic death. His whole body was bitten in half by the monsters. My sister was also covered in blood and flesh. Her whole head was crushed by the monsters. In this life, the child still didn't survive. It can only be said that people who court death will surely die. When my mother woke up and saw the corpses all over the ground, including those of her children, my sister, and my brother-in-law, she was greatly shocked. She went crazy immediately. She was yelling and was carried into the air by a rushing monster, and then thrown down, smashing into a bloody mess. Although I had seen all kinds of tragic scenes, when I saw my relatives die a miserable death, my heart still couldn't help but ache. 3 years passed, and the number of humans left in the whole world was less than 50%. One morning when the sun rose, the official account that had been silent for a long time issued a notice. All the monsters had been completely eliminated through technological means. The survivors could finally go out of their homes with peace of mind. Everyone united as one and began to rebuild a beautiful homeland. 17. Epilogue. After the new homeland was built, in this world, I no longer had any relatives. But I felt unexpectedly relaxed. Under the national policy that encouraged marriage, having more children, and giving birth, I still chose to move forward alone. I worked, traveled, enjoyed delicious food, and went to see the concerts of my favorite idols. Everything was going on in an orderly manner. We all have a bright future.